Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome council, staff, and members of the public to this special meeting of council Friday, March the 4th. 48 hours notice was provided in accordance with the Town of Petrolia's procedural bylaw, and the agenda was posted on the town website and provided to council at 2 p.m. on March the 2nd, 2022. Again, I want to thank council and everyone for coming on such short notice and call this meeting to order. I'd like to call upon Mrs. Pearson, please, Clerk Operations Clerk, for the disclaimer.
Thank you, Your Worship. And our disclaimer is that this meeting is being recorded. So council members, staff, guests, and members of the public are advised that the Council of the Town of Petrolia meetings are being video and audio recorded and will be live streamed and posted to the Town of Petrolia's YouTube, along with the official written minutes on our website. As such, comments and opinions expressed may be published, and any comments expressed by individual council members, guests, and the public are their own and do not represent the opinions or comments of the Town of Petrolia as a whole and or the Council of the Town of Petrolia. The recorded video of the full council meeting is not considered the official record of that meeting. The official record of the council meeting shall consist solely of the minutes approved by council of the Town of Petrolia.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. And at this time, I'd also like to ask Mrs. Pearson, please, for the roll call.
Thank you. And Councillor Dayton does not contribute towards our quorum as he is on an approved leave of absence. Councillor Field.
Present.
Councillor O'Hara.
Present.
Councillor Purdy. Councillor Such.
Present.
Councillor Welton.
Present.
Mayor Loosely.
Present.
We do have a quorum, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. At this time, I'd like to ask council regarding declaration of pecuniary interest. If any councillor has a conflict of interest regarding our agenda today, to state it now or at the appropriate time. Okay, seeing none, I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda before you today. Moved by Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Welton. And again, this is only to discuss the two items on the agenda. This is just a special meeting. Any discussion from council? All those in favor of approving the adoption of the agenda? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. There are no minutes to be considered at this special meeting, and I'd like to move on to the declaration of our state of emergency that was declared on March 13th, 2020 in the Town of Petrolia. And I'd like to request council consider lifting that from the table to coincide with the province of Ontario regulations. So I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to put the motion on the floor, and then I'll have the clerk read it. Moved by Councillor O'Hara, seconded by Councillor Welton. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion, please.
Excellent. That motion is that the state of emergency declared on March 13th, 2020 in the Town of Petrolia be lifted effective immediately in conjunction with the province of Ontario.
Any discussion from council? Councillor Field.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions. We lift this today. Does this affect any funding that would come to us? Is there any ramifications around that? And I guess the second part of it, under that state of emergency, we started doing Zoom calls through the pandemic. Are our Zoom calls, our council meetings affected by that? So I guess I'm just looking for what does it mean today if we lift the state of emergency? Is there any ramifications or things that could come back at us? I'd hate to have to go back and put it back on in a few weeks. So I guess I'm just looking for some clarification.
Okay, Mrs. Pearson, can you answer that? Or sorry, Mr. Charlebois, our CAO, has his hand up. Go ahead, Mr. Charlebois.
Thank you. Through you, Worship. That's a good question about the funding and all the COVID funding that we got in 2020 and 2021, and probably to get some in 2022, has all been through grants. My understanding is that 5 to 10% of the 444 municipalities didn't enact a state of emergency. So it doesn't affect our funding for COVID. But our normal process is if we have like a snowmageddon like we had here quite a while back, we have to enact that as a council in order to be qualified for the funding, special funding. But it doesn't affect COVID.
And Mrs. Pearson, can I ask you to maybe respond? I think our plan was to stay on a Zoom meeting until the end of this month. Is that still appropriate?
Certainly, Your Worship, I can respond to Councillor Field's question. So council, through our procedural bylaw, we did make amendment that speaks to electronic meeting participation. And so that amendment does reflect that electronic participation can be called at the chair, depending on the situation. So we are able to continue under our own procedural bylaw until further directed by the chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. Councillor Field, are you okay with that?
Yeah, no, I just wanted just an understanding. I think I was more concerned if it was going to impact funding, if we didn't have an emergency declared. It's interesting to know that there was some municipalities that didn't declare. And the other question, I know eventually we're going to be back, and at the end of this month, I guess a lot will be told to us regarding mass indoors and that opportunity to come back. So I guess if I can just piggyback on that with the video and ask this question, I think it's still within the same realm. With doing the video or the Zoom, we are now recording and going on to YouTube. Would it be appropriate to ask if there is a consideration when we do come back into council? Or should I wait to a next council meeting to ask for a report or ideas of how we can continue that? I think it's well received in a lot of municipalities, and even in ours, I've had comments. I think that it's important to document our meetings and put that forward. I think because of what we've experienced in a pandemic with Zoom and these calls and recording it, it's put us to a next level. And I think when we looked at this a few years ago, there was a high cost. So there's other municipalities that are doing this now and looking at the next step when we come back into the chambers. So I just would like that to be looked at, and hopefully in a future meeting to come back to explain how we can continue with that best practice.
Thank you, Councillor Field, and I agree with that. I think we could certainly at the next meeting look at a motion recommending staff come back with a report, because I think I would like to continue doing that if possible without spending a lot of money as well. So because we're just dealing with the two items today, I'll just put a hold on that. I would like to just mention, though, I would like the council to think about the possibility of extending our one more Zoom meeting to the first meeting in April. That would allow anyone going to Good Roads, because they changed the date, to at least participate in the council meeting. I did withdraw from Good Roads because it was going to be a council meeting night, but that would give the individual the opportunities to still participate. So think about that between now and the end of March, and we'll decide if you want to go until, I think it's April the 11th for our council meeting. And after that, it would be in person. Okay, just to get back, we do have a motion on the floor regarding lifting the emergency order. Is there any further discussion regarding that motion? If not, all those in favor of that motion? Opposed? That motion carries. And the next thing we have there's two bylaws. The one is the CUPE agreement that we did approve on February the 14th. But we had to do the bylaw, and our next meeting is not till the end of the month. Seemed like a long time. So I approve putting it on for this, so at least we can start moving ahead with making the necessary salary adjustments. So I'd like to ask a motion to have the two bylaws read a first and second time, please. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor O'Hara, seconded by Councillor Welton. Any discussion regarding the two readings? All those in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. And I'd like to have a motion to approve the bylaws for the third reading, finally signed, sealed, and numbered, and I'll have the clerk read that as well. So I'll need a mover and a seconder to approve those bylaws. Moved by Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Welton, and I will ask the clerk to read those two bylaws, please.
And that is for bylaw number 11 of 2022, being a bylaw of the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia to authorize the mayor and the chief administrative officer treasurer to sign a collective agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia and the Canadian Union of Public Employees and its local 2393, also known as QP 2393, be read a third time and finally passed. And that bylaw number 12 of 2022, being a bylaw of the Corporation of the Town of Petrolia to confirm the resolutions and motions of the Council of the Town of Petrolia, which were adopted up to and including March 4th, 2022, be read a third time and finally passed.
Any discussion from council regarding those two motions? All those in favor of approving those two bylaws? Opposed? That motion carries. And just before we go to adjournment, I just wanted to mention, I want to thank council and the community over the last 2 years. And now the feeling with the new provincial guidelines on March the 1st, to be very hopeful and excited to return to the events and activities that we all love. I would also like to request that we all continue to support our local businesses during these difficult times. And at this time, I just call for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Field, seconded by Councillor Such. Any discussion as to the time? And that will be to our next meeting to be held on Monday, March the 28th. I'll ask the clerk to read that motion to adjourn, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And that is that the March 4th special meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting of council scheduled for Monday, March the 28th, 2022.
Bless you. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion from council? All those in favor of adjournment? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate completing this and have a great day.